Hi there. When Mom died last August holiday weekend, it was a celebratory day. For her, anyway. She asserted control over her own life again by choosing to end it in the way she wanted. I've honored that decision by carrying on with life just as she did when she became an orphan in the early 1980s. Well, you have to, I can hear her say. The last year has provided me times to think about her, though, many times. Here are 6. Number 1, ballroom lessons. As an homage to the passion Mom and Dad shared for dancing, in the weeks immediately after her death, I took a few lessons at the local ballroom studio. I remembered the fun I'd had as a teenager whipping around the room with Dad in a fast waltz or playing the, quote, man's part with Mom to a routine set to Eric Clapton's Lay Down Sally. Dad wasn't a fan of these more modern pieces. Private lessons proved too big a commitment of time and money, but it was a lovely way to honor their memory. Number 2, the bitterly cold winter. Mom loathed being cold and really hated winter. Each time I shoveled or donned a second sweater in my little house last winter, I remembered the glee she felt knowing she was avoiding another winter. 3, first goslings of the year. I often connected with Mom about random things and in random ways. If something I thought might interest her crossed my path, I'd email her a snap. Beautiful flower in my garden, public art that appealed, a perfectly cooked piece of fish, or the sunset on the Humber River. When I traveled, I'd telephone her, knowing she'd be pleased to feel part of that trip. It was the first goslings on the river this year, though, when I felt that absence most. Number 4, Stephen Lewis dying. I developed an interest in current events, sitting aside Mom and Dad listening to CBC News, a connection Mom and I shared until she died. I'm sorry we didn't get to share the moment when former New Democrat politician and international humanitarian Stephen Lewis died earlier this year. She would have recounted the time she and Dad went to hear Lewis speak in Huron County. I think I got that memory right anyway. If anyone can confirm, I'd be grateful. Number 5, the inheritance. With the end of the Mom-Dad duo came the distribution of what was still banked from their 3 decades of farming. After a 40-year retirement, it wasn't a lot, and what's more, we'd been raised not to plan for or even expect intergenerational wealth. I felt some pressure, therefore, to do something meaningful with my share. Most went on to the mortgage, but I held some back for 2 upgrades I thought would be fitting tributes. 1, in retirement, both my parents were avid gardeners. I invested some of my inheritance, therefore, into a backyard pollinator garden, including a corner reserved for asparagus, a crop my dad grew in abundance. And 2, my mother spent the years on the Wingham farm dreading the possibility of the power failing, which would make it impossible to milk the 35 cows. While they had no money for a generator for themselves, I used some of theirs to install generators for each of the 2 houses on my property. With the changing climate, power outages are increasingly common. I would have loved Mom to know both of these choices. I feel certain she would have approved. Number 6. Out of everything that's happened in a year, the thing that she would have liked to hear the most is this. A year ago, I wrote a lane changer profile about the pride I felt and still feel at her graceful widowhood and her resolve to exit life's highway with medical assistance. She would have been delighted to know that more people have read that column than anything else I've written. Yeah, she liked attention, and at her age, it had been in short supply for a long time. But more important to her, I think, was the spotlight I gave the agency and autonomy the MAID legislation gave her one last time. If you'd like to read about any of these things, there are links to other blogs on these topics on my website at celiachandler.com. Thanks so much for watching.